welcoming officially everyone again and take a moment to guide you through today's agenda. With me are as guest speakers Claudia Meeusen from GFLi and Daniel Fitz from UN Global Compact Network Austria. Claudia has a background in global and sustainable production system and works for the Global Feed LCA Institute, or GFLi, as most of us might know it, since mid-2024. Her main responsibilities are guiding companies through the branded data process. And today she will do that with us and show us the importance of LCA databases and branded datasets and how to use them. And Daniel has a background in resource management and is leading the program development for environment and climate for participating companies of the UN Global Compact in Austria. His focus areas include strategic corporate climate management, circular economy, and biodiversity. And he will start by giving us an update on the current status of SBTi and CSRD and talk about what effective climate strategies look like. The goal of today's webinar is to keep it very practical and application focused. So at the end, you will know how to reduce your CO2 footprint of soy and animal supply chains as part of an effective climate strategy. Now let's start with the topics. The effects of climate change are becoming more and more visible and closer to us. Last year we had severe floodings around Vienna, while at the same time we had droughts in other parts of Europe. And anyone working in agriculture knows that climate change is more and more having almost unmanageable impacts on farming systems. That's why it's encouraging to see that so many companies are motivated to reduce their carbon footprint and work on climate plans. I see this very often in meetings with our Donau Soja members and partners. And it's also promising that now more than 10,000 companies have committed to reduce their carbon footprint as part of the Science-Based Targets initiative, compared to only half of that in the last year. And also the EU with the Green Deal, the CSRD, CSDDD, CBAM, taxonomy, etc., provided a regulatory framework that drives companies towards climate action. And now I'm gonna start sharing my presentation with you. So I hope this is... I hope you see now the full screen of my presentation. And of course, it's a webinar in 2025, so we're gonna start with a Mentimeter survey. Please take your phones or click on the link for the questions. Okay, let's start with the first question. So we are interested to know, where are you currently in your climate strategy process? Okay, I see one answer. Okay, more answers coming. Quite good at the moment still. Okay, I'll give another few seconds to have that everyone has the chance to answer. Yeah, we're just getting started, and we're developing a roadmap, also already 1/3. It's good to see that many companies are already there. Okay, so most companies are actually already developing a roadmap. That's really interesting. But even perfect timing when you're still in the process of developing a roadmap with different actions to include. Okay, now let's try to go to the next question. No, this is one. So this now is the right question. What is your biggest open question or challenge regarding your climate strategy? I hope you can enter something. There should now be given answers. Okay, now I see. Now I see answers coming in. Yeah, inform ourselves and wait for updates. Data, yes, where to get good data. Scope 3, yeah, Scope 3 I think is a big topic. This is probably the most complicated part together with getting good data. Okay, I'll give a few more seconds before we go to the next question. I see it's a lot about how to, yeah, wait for updates, wait for guidance. Okay, then let's try to go to the next Mentimeter question. So this is especially interesting to see how are you dealing with the current regulatory uncertainties like this omnibus regulation. Yes, wait for clarity, preparing ourselves regardless. Okay, I think it's good to see that some are preparing themselves regardless of what the regulation will be. This is actually a good bridge to the start of the webinar. Because what you will see today is that with a solid climate strategy based on solid data, this is what company needs, and that's independent of regulation. Because you should not build the strategy just to follow the regulation, but you should build the strategy to stay resilient in this changing environment and future-proof your business. Because the regulations, they might come or might not come, they might change. But if your strategy is solid and fits to your company, you will always stay ahead of the regulations and be prepared. And that's why I'm especially glad to have Daniel and Claudia with me today to give more clarity and direction in this topic, this complex but urgent topics. But first, we're going to start with a short introduction to Donau Soja before Daniel will give us an update on CSRD, SBTi, and the introduction to climate strategies. Donau Soja is an independent, non-profit organization with the vision of a safe and sustainable protein supply for Europe. Our vision is supported by 24 EU governments, and we have more than 330 members in 33 countries and more than 9,000 farmers producing more than 1 million tons of certified soy every year, according to our Donau Soja and Europe Soja standards. And this soy you will see in the course of the webinar, can become very important for your climate targets. Yeah, we have offices in Vienna, in Novi Sad, in Chisinau, and Kiev. So we are present in some of the most relevant European soy producing countries on the ground with our offices. We work on a comprehensive protein strategy for Europe because, in short, we consume too much soy in Europe and we have to import too much of it. So this protein strategy basically says we have to consume less soy in general. We have to produce more soy in Europe, and what we import has to be sustainable. And we will see more on that later. Therefore, we work on different levels: political level, market work, for example, with our standards, the Donau Soja and Europe Soja standards, but also protein partnerships to increase the certified European soy volumes, and also in research and innovation. One important tool as part of our market work is our non-GM market report and daily price updates. This market report tries to bring transparency in the soy market with prices, with harvest forecasts, etc., and is for companies in that area an important source for soy. Also, we have published our SDG report. Basically, we are working towards all of the SDG goals, but especially towards responsible consumption and production, climate action, and partnerships for the goals. And this is now the perfect bridge to give the stage to Daniel. He is not only very familiar with the SDGs, but also we partner often with them here in Austria. And now we will try to, yes, Daniel will try to share the screen now and give you his presentation.
All right, thank you, Christoph, for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me to today's webinar and to give you all a brief update on the global corporate climate management that is in some change right now, at least in perception. In reality, not so much. And that's one of my points for today. Since frameworks and compliance programs like the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive don't necessarily mean that you have to follow the compliance, but there are a strategy that will be derived from that. So first, I'd like to briefly introduce the UN Global Compact for those who are not familiar, very briefly, as an organization that is now 25 years old this year, founded by Kofi Annan at the United Nations, with the goal to implement the sustainable development internationally with the private sector predominantly. We're now about 25,000 companies worldwide in more than 60 countries present. Here you see an assortment of topics, very broad topics that we cover even in Austria in 2025. And each year, of course, as the topic of sustainability gets more fragmented, the topics become more and more, but the topics become more interesting in our opinion as well. The forms of how we deliver those assistance for the private sector would be here listed. It's a global strategy that we followed, basically coming down to a regional strategy that is more or less aligned with the European Green Deal. Has to be, as it is in high demand from the private sector anyway. And then there's a national strategy. Each country network from the UN Global Compact has to follow, and depending on the needs of the private sector, we tailor specific topics with a variety of delivery methods. But we are here to talk about, first, I was asked to give a brief summary of what is actually happening with the omnibus. What was the intention? Well, basically it was to drive competitiveness. What we now have is unfortunately a severe reduction of scope. Many companies are not mandatory to report anymore, specifically on the CSRD. There's reporting obligations that are now only for large companies, generally over 1,000 employees, and to 50 million turnover or 20 million balance total sheet. There's also, again, as mentioned, the postponement. First-time application for many companies is postponed by 2 years, so to 2027 and fiscal year 2028. It's also very much the case that it's will become simplified. A significant part of it is a reduction of data points that was initially proposed and is now reduced in addition to having no sector-specific requirements, one thing that was guaranteed, but now is definitely not gonna happen. Next point would be the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, the CSRD, on the supply chain predominantly, this topic. Very interesting here also, later entry, focus on larger companies mostly. Many companies are not in scope anymore, again. Interesting also is the simplification of the due diligence obligations, like the risk analysis will only be every 5 years instead of annually. And also of note is that companies are only have to analyze their tier 1, so nothing beyond that needs to be included in the EEE as it stands right now, which is very unfortunate since there's clear data even by the OECD that the predominant corruption and human rights abuses and climate scandals or pollution scandals, as you may, are happening in tier 2 and beyond. So more than 80% will not be covered if it stands as it is right now. And also, of course, there will be reduction on the scope of the EU taxonomy. But we don't want to go into depth on what is the reduction of the. We want to look forward to what actually can help and not what doesn't drive sustainability for today. I brought for you today a selection of frameworks that are maybe interesting for your company, for your organization to follow and to look into. Specifically, we want to focus on with an SME focus and what can actually help you develop a climate strategy, a solid climate strategy that actually drives impact with your organization and socially. So the CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project, has an SME framework. It is a streamlined version. There are 5 main areas. There are emissions, governance, strategy, targets, risk and opportunity management. Again, it is a streamlined version of the original CDP questionnaire, which is rather comprehensive and for bigger companies predominantly, but it's a good pathway to start for many companies and to get an idea what lies ahead the more you mature as a company. The much talked about voluntary sustainability reporting standards for SMEs, the VSME, needs to be mentioned here in this presentation, of course. One thing that has to be of note is that there is a basic and a comprehensive module offered with a significant reduced amount of data set or data points compared to the CSRD. And it was always meant as a voluntary standard. Many bigger companies are looking towards the VSME now as an option. The fact that it does not include double materiality, I'm going to go into that later, is probably not a good idea because double materiality is a significant tool to prioritize for your organization, specifically what kind of impact do you want to drive. The B impact assessment, very quickly mentioned, mostly because it is one of the only few free tools that is offered in the internet where you can start right now, where you can assess your company on a variety of sustainability issues, streamlining and wanting to go to a B Corp certification in the future. EcoVadis is a very important framework and questionnaire specifically on your supply chain. Many of your companies will probably have heard of it, but there is the public, but the most of the questions are public, so you can look into the questions that your bigger companies will ask you in the future, very likely, as EcoVadis is increased in popularity. So the communication on progress, the least known framework there is from the Global Compact network that I'm representing today. Participants of the UN Global Compact have to report annually. And the questions there that are derived from the GRI or other bigger frameworks help you assess a variety of sustainability targets, also in alignment with the CSRD, by the way. And it's a good tool for many starting and smaller companies to actually go and see what questions lie ahead in their sustainability journey. Plus, if you submit those questions, there's an opportunity to have a global benchmarking year to year and see by sector how you fare. Those questions are not rated. Mentioned for Austria specifically, also interesting, maybe as a replicant tool, is the ESG Data Hub from the Österreichische Kontrollbank ÖKP in Austria, where you can voluntarily participate in offering a couple of questions, and those questions can be specifically targetedly released to financial institutions. Very interesting Austrian tool that will be replicated in Europe likely. And the Science-Based Targets Initiative, not going to go into depth on this topic, but of note is that there is a simplified SME route that does not cover necessarily the scope 3, unfortunately, but it also assists in starting your climate transition planning, getting credible targets. I want to go to a guide that our network, the Global Compact Network, has just released. It's a comprehensive guide on climate transition planning. For the purpose of this webinar, I'm only going to go into 2 of those topics that are of note for strategic planning. That would be the definition of a climate target, so science-based target, and the other one would be the performance of scenario analysis and risk and opportunity, so climate risk analysis. On the science-based targets today, I bring you information on, I guess many of you in this call will probably have heard of science-based targets and their process of reissuing and reworking the net zero standards. Here on this slide, you can see a variety of changes that are being proposed and to be enforced and be in place in 2026. Maybe of interest is scope 1 and 2 changes here. On 1, we have an update on the scope 1 absolute contraction method that will include historical performance and an update in pathways in line with the IPCC AR6 report in scenarios. Interesting, maybe in scope 3 for many of you, updated target boundary based on emission relevance here, greater emphasis on alignment target and metrics. And of course, there's an activity pools and indirect mitigation for hard to trace emissions. It should say emissions here. The whole discussion was about last year about removals and the carbon credits, and they are being mentioned here now in the new net zero standard. The role of removals, the lead up to the net zero year will be officially written in the requirements next year. And there will be minimum durability requirements for the removals if you want to have them within your net zero target. And on the beyond value chain mitigation, there's an option to obtain additional recognition alongside your net zero pathway that will be validated, but only alongside, but not included in your scope 3 emissions. Yes, that's probably very interesting for you to read in detail on the Science-Based Target website. They have a very good news block that goes into detail for those of you who are interested. Maybe here of note only, when will it be in place for those who already have a science-based target at the end of the current target time frame or 2030, whichever is earliest. There will have to be a change to the new net zero standard. For those who have a near-term target 2025 or 2026, yeah, you set a near-term target, you need to align after 5 years or at the end of 2030. And For all those who set a science-based targets from 2027 onwards, they only need to align with the new standard. I want to jump to another very important topic on strategy. As we know, and there's clear evidence that double materiality assessment is a very important tool to pinpoint your biggest levers and to actually find your biggest levers if you want to drive sustainability within your company, and specifically also with the focus on climate. So even though it's not important with regards from the VSME standard, we as Global Compact and many other organizations want to emphasize that double materiality is of use even for an SME. There's good guidance on the EFRAG to start your double materiality assessment and then begin your strategy. Maybe interesting of note here also that stakeholder engagement, which will be before the double materiality assessment, is important. Many of you, well, if I've seen in the questions before that you had troubles with the stakeholder engagement before and reaching them properly. There is a variety of information on this topic, and I can only emphasize you look on the maybe Global Compact webpage, because we have documents that assist in stakeholder engagement, specifically with reaching them, how to engage them, and how you to better your stakeholder engagement, generally speaking, year to year. Okay, and the last slide for today for me is to round the whole strategy up and the whole argument that Christoph initiated before, is the climate strategy is important, and how to mitigate with using Donau Soja as one of your strategies. First, what is a climate risk? For those interested here, there's physical climate risk and transitory climate risks. On the physical side, can be classified under chronic and acute. Here you see from temperature, wind, water, solids, a couple of examples here. And on the transitory climate risks, stuff that is, of course, very much on the news with regards on political risks that are increasing, legal risks, market risks, reputational risks, and technology risks. And all of those can be mitigated with a, let's say, shorter supply chain, which is an argument for why maybe use Donau Soja. So on what we can recommend from a climate strategy point of view is the identification on climate risks. To start with that, start on identifying what are your risks right now, how severe are they, and classifying how and go into the assessment at next point. There's data collection, of course. It always helps to have a scientifically minded colleague to actually analyze all this data. That is very hard to find colleagues usually that are significantly minded on interpreting those data, but of course there are a lot of data solutions that help you with that. The scenario analysis that was mentioned before will help you to draw different scenarios and then decide on scenarios divided by degrees of warming. And so on those scenario analysis will help you decide which scenario plan you want to follow. And then, of course, there's also an vulnerability analysis for your company. Very detailed for many SMEs that might be too complicated, but I can only emphasize here again, look into this because it is still part of your climate strategy, and climate strategy will become part of should become part of your corporate strategy as a whole. And of course, if you decide to use, to have a discussion about it and afterwards, and introduce it into your climate risk management as an annual strategy year to year. And by that, I'm looking forward to your questions, if there are any. Thank you for the opportunity again. And I'm going to give it back to Christoph. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Now we have seen the current status of the regulations, but also what other guidance is out there that companies can use to start or to further develop their climate strategy. And what we have also seen in the Mentimeter survey is that data is one of the biggest challenges. And this is now where Claudia can help us with. The GFLi provides a lot of good data. Therefore, Claudia, please share your screen.
Yes.
Yeah, it's loading.
Yeah, can you see the presentation?
Yes, perfect. We can see it full screen.
Great. All right. Thank you for the invitation and for the introduction. So today I will tell a bit more about GFLi. What is GFLi? What does GFLi do? A bit more about the GFLi database that we have. We also would like to give some information about LCA. Maybe some of you already know a lot about LCAs, but I can also imagine that some people are not that familiar with it. And then I will continue with branded data and how you can access branded data. So GFLi is the Global Feed LCA Institute, and we're a non-profit institute. So we value sustainability very much, especially in the feed sector, as it becomes very important because the majority of the animal protein emissions are derived from the feed sector. So GFLi has a database which is globally accessible, and our database includes as many data as possible about LCAs of different animal feed ingredients. GFLi supports the environmental assessment of animal feed ingredients, and we believe it's important to have a compliant, credible, and a transparent assessment. And lastly, we foster continuous improvement of the environmental performance of animal-derived products. So GFLi, a bit background information about when GFLi started. We started way back in 2010 as a public-private partnership. And in 2015, GFLi became a coalition project, where after the start of the GFLi methodology began. I'll tell a bit more about the methodology in the next slide. In 2019, GFLi became a non-profit entity, and from 2020 onwards, GFLi further developed. We also became a member-based institute. We grew in the amount of members, and we also published the database, which we update regularly. So a bit more information about GFLi itself. So we're an institute. We have a secretariat. We're not a very big institute. We're only with 2 to 3 people working on the day-to-day management. We also have the GFLi board and a technical management committee. And in the technical management committee, we have multiple companies which are member of GFLi, and in those meetings we discuss technical difficulties which we experience. And lastly, we also have a scientific advisory council. So GFLi has 2 main products that we offer. The first one is the database, and secondly, we have the methodology. So our methodology is aligned with the developments on national and international regulations. Some examples are the PAFCR feeds, the ISO standards, and the FAO LEAP guidelines. And using our methodology, we create all the data in our database. So the database is managed by our database manager, and we also continuously improve the database. And lastly, important to know is that GFLi also values partnership very much with stakeholders in the feed sector, but also in the food industry. So now I'd like to continue with a bit more information about the GFLi database itself. So our database contains over 1,800 datasets, and these datasets are derived from all over the world. In the map on the right, you can see where most of the datasets are coming from. So we have a lot of datasets coming from North America, from South America, Europe a lot, and also some from Asia and Australia. So in our dataset, averages are included. These are regional averages. And all data in our data set, in our database, is derived from different data providers. And these data providers could be research institutes, universities, or companies, for example. So our goal of collecting all these data sets is to collect and model data following the GFLi methodology. And our goal is to fill in the existing data gaps and existing knowledge gaps and improve our the existing data sets and the methodology. So now I would like to continue with what an LCA actually is. I will also explain a bit more using a simplified example later on. So in an LCA systematically accounts for all the inputs and outputs for a specific product. So in our case, for a feed ingredient with a defined system boundary. So a system boundary could be, for example, from cultivation until the factory or until the retail. So it's up to the company to decide what the system boundaries are, as long as it's quite clear described. So the LCA can be a full LCA, which means that it includes all environmental impact categories. There are 16 environmental impact categories in total. It could also be a partial LCA. So that's if you only want to include your carbon footprint or want to know your global warming impact. So all data is collected, and this creates the life cycle inventory. And using the life cycle inventory, we can eventually calculate the emissions. So to calculate your LCA, we need some LCA modeling. And for the LCA modeling, we of course need data. So this is background data, which is derived from other databases. You also need activity data, which is more company specific. A model to make your LCA modeling. This could be for fuel, it could be for cultivation or for pesticides, for example. And lastly, we also need elementary flows. And combining all these different models, all these data, you can eventually create your LCA. So now I'd like to explain with an example what the LCA could be. So in our database, all data is expressed in the different environmental impact categories. So some examples are water use, land use, fossil fuel depletion, or ozone depletion. So for my example, I will use a soybean meal, which you can see on the right. And in order to create your end product, you need to start at the beginning of the process, which is the cultivation of your soybean meal. And in order to cultivate your soybean meal, you need some fertilizers and machineries and fuel, which are different inputs for the cultivation. And soybean is mostly cultivated in South America. So, for example, I took Brazil. So after the cultivation, we need to transport our soybeans to Europe. Therefore, fuel is necessary, which generates the output as CO2 emissions. And after transport, the soybeans are transported to the manufacturer, where it's processed into the eventual end product, soybean meal. And for processing, there's also energy needed, which also generates emissions. So we have a lot of inputs. This is very simplified, but the whole LCA has a lot of different inputs, different outputs. And all these inputs and outputs are used to eventually calculate your LCA. So after the LCA calculations are finalized, it's possible to include those data into our database. I made a screenshot of part of our database. So for example, you can see here the product barley grain. And here you can see the nitrogen content and the phosphor content. We also have for particular products the dry matter content available. And in this column, you can see the DQR. And the DQR is the data quality rating, which indicates the quality of the data. And the closer the numbers to 1, the better the quality of the data is. And later on in the database, you can find all different impact categories. So here are some examples of the impact categories that we have. So we have our database as an Excel format, but we also have other formats. These are SCV files. And these CSV files can be used in CIMA Pro, for example, for more LCA modeling. So we have multiple different database formats which can be used by companies, depending on why you would like to have the data. So what does the GFLi database offers to the sector? First of all, we have data which is based on a harmonized methodology, because all our data is calculated using the same methodology. We're aligned with the international guidelines. And because our data is based on the same calculations, it's easy to compare different feed ingredients within our database, and benchmarking is also possible. And lastly, you can use the database for calculations for the environmental footprint of products. So companies can be the driver of innovation for more sustainable feed and animal protein using the GFLi database. The database can also be used to meet your Scope 3 emission targets, as the majority of the animal protein impact is derived from the feed sector. And lastly, GFLi data can be used for marketing and communication purposes. So if you would like to use the database, we have different licenses. I included a link in the PowerPoint, so you can click on that later. We have commercial licenses and developer licenses. The commercial licenses are more for companies. And we also have developer license available for developers who would like to use the GFLi data for integration into a software or into a tool they are developing. So now I would like to continue with the GFLi brand data. That's how I got in contact with Donau Soja. They're actually they also participated in our pilot phase and now applied for a new branded data product. So first I would like to explain what branded data actually is. So it's a lifecycle inventory of a feed ingredient, and that feed ingredient is marketed under a specific brand or it's owned by a company. So the feed ingredient contains very company-specific values, and there's little averages used. So it's different compared to other data in the GFLi database, because the values are very company-specific and no regional or sectoral. No, there are no averages used. The averages are more used in regional or sectoral data sets. And also for branded data, there are higher requirements for primary data. So the representativeness of branded data is higher. So branded data we started with branded data in 2022 with the pilot phase. We had some participants, and we evaluated those results of those participants to develop our methodology. Our methodology was published in October 2023, and since last year it's now possible to apply for branded data. We already have multiple companies that applied, but we're also always looking for more companies that are willing to apply for branded data. So what is the added value of branded data for your company? So first of all, it gives insight into your own emission, because you have very specific data about your own company. It makes it easier to track your sustainability and to see how well you are performing on the sustainability part. The data can also be used for sustainability reporting, because GFLi is a recognized methodology and we're aligned with international guidelines, making it easy to use a GFLi branded data for sustainability reporting. And as I already mentioned, the branded data can be used for comparisons of your own company feed ingredient, and you can compare it to the averages in the GFLi database. So you can easily see if you're performing very well or where you can make some improvements. And it also gives insight in your own supply chain, because for the LCA calculations, you need a lot of insight in the data of the suppliers. So it provides a lot of insight. And lastly, just like the GFLi, on the other data in the GFLi database, branded data can also be used for marketing and communication purposes. So if you would like to apply for branded data, we have a branded data methodology available on the website. It's also possible to contact me or contact the secretariat for more information. I'll tell very briefly how to apply for branded data and what is necessary. So first of all, the company applying for branded data needs to have their LCA calculations. It's good to know that GFLi isn't an LCA consultant, so we don't make the LCA calculations, we only review them. So once you have your LCA data available for us, there needs some paperwork that needs to be signed. And we can perform the internal review with our GFLi LCA expert. And after the internal review, there should also be an external review where after we can, if everything is approved, you will receive the letter of confirmation and the company is able to publish their data on our website and into our database, but it's up to the company whether they would like to do that or not. And I would also like to point out where to find branded data and especially the Donau Soja branded data. So we have on the website, I've also included the link over here where you can go to the branded data participants page. You can see here part of the table, including all the branded data participants. Here you can see the Donau Soja. And if you scroll down, you can see the free purchase button where you can click on and you will receive Excel file containing the branded data. So it's not possible yet to include branded data into our GFLi database due to some technical difficulties that we experience. But our aim is to integrate the branded data into the GFLi database by October, because then it's also our major database update. And it would be great if it was possible that the branded data is then included into the GFLi database. And the last thing I would like to point out one more time is that we're a member-based institute. We now have over 40 members, but we're always looking for more members or for partnerships. So if you're interested in GFLi or want to know more about GFLi, please contact me or contact info@globalfeedlca.org. And we can schedule a meeting for further information. So I'd like to thank you all for your time.
Yes, also thank you for presenting this. I think what we can learn here is that creating branded data set is not easy. It needs good primary data. It needs to reach certain quality criteria. And this is important to think about when I go on now showing you our Donau Soja data, because we have done that. We have done the whole process to create branded data sets. So I'm going to share my presentation again and to show you where and how Donau Soja now comes into play into your climate targets and strategies. But first, we're going to start with why soy? We have so many agricultural products. Why should we focus on soy? Well, the difference to most of the other agricultural products we use, and also we use as animal feed, is that we produce most of them in Europe. Most of the agricultural products in the EU, we have a self-sufficiency rate of about 100%, some even more than 100%, meaning it all comes from here. It's no big problem with deforestation, land conversion, etc. But not for soy. We only produce about 8% of the soy we use in the European Union. And this is what we call the protein gap, this 92% that we need to reach what we consume every year. And how to make this gap smaller is the challenge that we are facing. And this challenge is quite significant and comes with a lot of issues. It means we are very, very highly dependent on imports, especially from two countries, which is the US and Brazil, and both come with their own issues. And we really need both of them to be able to reach all the soy that we consume. Especially in South America, this also increases, or there is a high pressure on valuable ecosystems because there's still a lot of land conversion going on for new soy fields. And this is what we import here. And of course, having this high dependency on imports is a risk for the resilience of our food system here. Because if we cannot get the soy we need, we have a big problem, especially for our livestock sector. So looking at the ecological issues with it, first, deforestation is responsible for about 11% of the greenhouse gases produced by humans, and almost all of it is because of extension of agriculture, meaning new fields for soy production, new forests for palm oil or for cattle ranching. And as said before, we import a lot of soy, namely 30 to 35 million tons per year, and only a little part of it is deforestation free. This means that soya accounts for about 1/3 of the deforestation that we so-called like virtually import into the EU. And this makes the EU the second largest importer of deforestation. So that means we import a lot of soy, and this has a big carbon footprint. And what do we do with the soy? We feed it to the animals. That means basically with every soybean we feed to our animals here, it increases the carbon footprint or the carbon backpack of the animals. But we not only have nice pictures to show that, we also have data. If we look at a pig, about half of the carbon footprint of a pig is based on the animal feed. It can only be much higher, as Claudia mentioned in her presentation. But let's for now say half of it. And if we look into the different parts of the animal feed, we see that the biggest part of it is the protein part of the animal feed. And in there, the biggest part is the soy that we import from South America. That means by switching to Donau soja, we can reduce the biggest single part of the carbon footprint of the whole animal significantly. And there are also studies on it. In 2011, a study came to the conclusion that there is a potential of reducing the carbon footprint of the pig by about 50% by switching to deforestation-free certified European soy. And if we look like how can we achieve that, this is what we did at Donau Soja and the whole process that Claudia just presented to create branded data sets. So we collected primary data from different farmers from different countries to get a representative sample for the Donau soja and Europe soja soybeans. And if you compare that to the imports, the uncertified imports from Brazil, you can achieve about a 90% reduction of emissions by using Donau soja. And this is what you can find as branded data sets in GFLi, but also in AgriFootprint, in Sestel, and also in SBTi flag compliant format. This is really important for companies that are now on their way to reduce their carbon emissions and have soy or animal products in their supply chains. Because here you have data that reaches all the quality standards for your own life cycle assessments, meaning you can use that to calculate it and you can use that to show the reductions over time. And this is also what companies already did. If we look at direct soy products like soybean meal, you can see two different processors of soy that produce soybean meal. Both came to a reduction of 80% by using Donau soja and Europe soja compared to the European market mix. And that means the average soy we have here in Europe, it contains imports from the US, it contains imports from South America, but also European soy. And then by switching to Donau soja, you can reduce that by about 80%. Another soy product is soybean oil. And here you can see that you can achieve, again, about 90% reduction by switching to Donau soja and Europe soja certified beans for the as starting product for the soybean oil. But what we do with most of the soy? We feed it to animals. And here you can see two different studies of egg producers in Germany, and both could achieve a carbon reduction of the egg by about 40% through switching to Donau soja or Europe soja. That means if you have eggs in your supply chains, if you produce eggs or if you sell eggs, you can reduce the carbon footprint of the egg, of the product, by about 1/3 only by changing one measure, which is the animal feed for the laying hens. And here we have a real-life example of pig production. The Gustino straw pig is a high animal welfare system in Austria. And by switching to Donau soja and Europe soja certified feed, the carbon footprint of the pig could be reduced by about 40%. And if the whole Austrian pig sector would do that, around 1 million tons of carbon emission could be avoided every year. But I will not go through all of the studies with you. I will show you an overview of all the studies that have been conducted with using Donau soja and Europe soja, either for direct soy products or as part of the animal feed. And on average, you can achieve a reduction in the livestock products by 30 to 47%. And this is really just changing one single thing in the production reduces the carbon footprint by more than 1/3. I really think this is amazing, and this is therefore an amazing tool that you can use for your climate transition plans. If you are currently in the process of developing them, you can commit to Donau soja for key products that you have identified or key suppliers or an individual commodity group, and increase the share of Donau soja over the next couple of years, for example, in this product or in this commodity group, and have a good, solid, science-based reduction plan for that product. And where does this come from? It's because of our standards for sustainable soy production. They guarantee European origin and traceability, they guarantee non-GM quality, but especially they guarantee deforestation and conversion-free production with an early cutoff date, and they also prohibit certain pesticides, they prohibit certain application methods of pesticides, and so on, that reduce the impact of agrochemicals on the product. And also, this is not relevant for the carbon footprint, but for the bigger picture, they also include social and labor rights. And if we look at even the bigger picture, Donau soja brings many benefits. Carbon reduction is just one of it. It helps if you need to report for CSRD or the SBTi flag, because it provides you the primary data, the branded data set that you need for the calculations and also to show the reduction over the next years. But it also helps you if you have deforestation or conversion-free commitments for soy supply chains. And it also opens markets. More and more retailers have commitments to sustainably certified soy in their supply chains, or industry agreements like QS Soja Plus in Germany or Arma Pastos Plus in Austria that only allow sustainably certified soy. And the QS system in Germany, for example, covers 90% of the German meat market. That means by switching to Donau soja, you cannot just reduce the carbon footprint, but there's like a whole other benefit that it brings. But if we look at even the bigger picture, European soy really brings many strategic benefits. Coming back to the start of my presentation, we are very dependent on imports. We need to import about 92% of the soy we need. That means we really need to increase the European soy consumption, soy production, to increase the resilience of our supply chain and our whole food system here. And it brings also environmental benefits, because currently we produce very little, we have very little legumes in the crop rotations here, and soy as a legume fixes nitrogen from the air into the soil. Less fertilizers are needed, less pesticides are needed. It is good for the soil and also good for the next crops in the crop rotation. But it also has systemic benefits because it reduces the pressure on ecosystems overseas, where still a lot of land conversion is happening for new soy that we still import here. The more we produce here, the less we need to import there. And it also adds value to our economy here because the cultivation, the processing, the production of products all stays here and adds to our economy. And it's ready for upscaling. We have knowledge and we have good inputs here for soy cultivation. The processing infrastructure is ready and soy grows well in Europe. With what to take away from this webinar? What we have learned is that a robust climate strategy is your best long-term investment. It prepares your company for future challenges with or without changing regulations. So don't wait for the regulation. Don't wait for the EU or whoever what exactly to do. Just look what is best for your company and do it. But of course, to do that, data matters. It's important to have, for a climate strategy, it's important to have solid data. Of course, you can have primary data for your own supply chain, but where you don't have that, LCA databases and especially branded datasets are very important. Branded datasets can be very specific, like the Donau Soja branded dataset that is really based on primary data from Donau Soja farmers. And achieves all the quality criteria that are needed for climate strategies. And then we come to Donau Soja. This is a powerful tool for CO2 reduction in soya and animal products. Switching to Donau Soja certified feed can reduce the carbon footprint of animal products by 30 to 47%, making it the key solution for effective decarbonization. And if you're interested to learn more about Donau Soja or our partners, then you are invited to our General Assembly and networking event on the 4th of September in Vienna. And on the evening before that, we have an excursion. You can find the detailed program and the registration for that on our website. And on 4th of November, we host a non-GM soy conference in Frankfurt to provide insights into regulatory developments, sustainability standards, and the global non-GMO availability, including discussions on the balance between real impact and marketing in sustainable business. You can also find a link here. And as promised before, on the last slide, you can see all of our contacts. So you can write us directly in case you have any questions on the webinar, on CO2 data, or if you want to switch to Donau Soja, and we, of course, want to help you to build up that supply chain. So thank you for joining us today. And with that, I'm going to end the webinar now.